One of the more common coping mechanisms we form in our lives, especially when faced with difficult times, is what some psychologists have termed as maladaptive daydreaming. Now, while I have tried to read on the subject matter, it seems like there isn't really a consensus. But when I look at my own life, I think it's pretty much something that I've fallen for and I've done a lot of. The concept pretty much is, not just daydreaming in terms of, fantasizing to like the normal average degree, but this is pretty much like going on for hours and hours in your head about how life would have been or how life should be and so on. And pretty much it's about creating this, nearly immersive experiences for hours and hours on end in your head in order to try and escape any trauma or anxiety or depression that you might be facing. Now, the interesting thing is that this is pretty much sort of like, I don't know what to call it, but sort of like the wine concept, the alcohol concept, that taken in small doses, the alcohol, the bacteria in wine is actually good for your gut and so on, but then overdo it and it becomes something really dangerous. The same can be said for maladaptive daydreaming. There isn't really anything wrong about letting your mind wander. About letting your mind wander. But pretty much the dangerous bit comes when maladaptive daydreaming becomes your default, your go-to, instead of living actual life. Now, how far can this actually push it? Psychologists have said that you should really worry when it starts interfering with your work and your day to day. But I think that there is another concern before it even gets to that, when all of a sudden it can make things worse instead of acting as a mere coping mechanism. And why is this? Let me go into the concept of depression as posed by, I'm not really sure, but I'm sure I saw it on this on YouTube. But pretty much he posed a simple definition of depression being when expectations don't meet reality. So that's a great way of trying to simplify a very complicated and nuanced subject matter. And to look at it from that lens, well, then it simplifies a lot. So expectations not meeting reality. Now the thing is, well, it puts us in sort of a catch-22, because almost always in life expectations never meet reality. So the question then becomes, well, how do you actually like go about this? Should I dream about the future? Should I kind of like try and figure out a vision board or something of that sort, trying to kind of like picture myself 10 years from now? Or should I be stuck in the day to day of trying to just get to tomorrow? Yeah. And that catch-22 is pretty much just what life is about. And so what I realized, this is now from a quote from Warren Buffett, is that he says, I picked this up from one of his videos. He says that the key to a long-lasting marriage, not a happy one, he was very particular in that. A key to a long marriage, not necessarily a happy one, disclaimer, is low expectations. And I found this very, very interesting because it's similar to what, and I'm guessing he picked it up from Benjamin Graham, what he taught about investments. Key to long-term investing is not necessarily having all the formulas and having everything right and everything go by your way and taking a lot of risk. The key to long-term investing is actually having low expectations. I found this a very interesting formula for life and a very interesting way to, not really formula, very interesting lens. Yeah, it's like a lens that you can put on in order to look at life. And I thought by reducing your expectations, then you'll never be disappointed. Perhaps that's another coping mechanism. Now, the rabbit hole that, is kind of like getting into was pretty much, okay, so if I have low expectations, that immediately lowers the bar because you also want to challenge yourself. And this is another catch-22. It almost seems like the minute you try to answer one question, it pops up into another. And that's why I'm kind of like making this video, because my mind is really just going on and on. And pretty much I thought, okay, so the danger with having no expectations is that you won't challenge yourself because you'll always, just be expecting the bare minimum. But if you're striving, and if you look at every successful person, even Warren Buffett, they really made their way by not settling. They really kind of like made their mark in their life, their own lives, and in the world by not settling for whatever was pretty much out there, and by pushing themselves above and beyond and taking on that challenge. Now, a lot of successful people have also attributed luck, but we can't really put luck in this equation because we have no control over luck. We're trying to figure out we're trying to focus only on the things that we can control. We can't have any control over luck, so that one is immediately out of the equation. So the question is, okay, what about our expectations and how do we actually use them to actually craft a better life, and one that is actually achievable? We don't want to set goals that, just for the sake of setting goals that sound nice. So I looked at all of this and I tried to kind of like reflect back on pretty much the short career that I've really had, and trying to actually look at, because it's almost been 5 years since I left undergrad, and it's been an interesting, very bumpy, very back and forth 5 years. And sometime last year, around September, late last year, I got laid off, and I was sort of interested in. I took a lot of time to kind of like pause and reflect and look at it in as objective a view that I can. And the thing that I realized is that for all sakes, there is no guidebook, because this is what had happened, and this is what Jim Carrey also warned against, that just by necessarily following any one of these rules or any one of these patterns or any one of these coping mechanisms, whatever you want to call them, pieces of advice, doesn't necessarily guarantee any chance of success. And what he says is along the lines of, just because you pick something that you don't like to do doesn't mean that you will be successful. So in essence, he was sort of like cautioning the path that, oftentimes you're told that you should put your dreams aside because dreams and passions, those are, unachievable. They won't get you anywhere. You just pretty much end up wasting all of your time, all of your youth. And you should, pretty much pick up the traditional path and just settle for the low expectations. Sounds like a pretty much straightforward deal, but then he puts this caveat that you might fail. And this is the same thing that happened to me last year. I looked at the situation that I was in and I realized that I put aside all of these other goals, because of the notion that you're supposed to, once you finish school, you're supposed to get a job and you're supposed to follow this path and so on and so forth. And, it's sort of like, it might not be as glamorous, but it works. But I had forgotten this one. I hadn't even forgotten. I didn't even know that there was this other disclaimer, this other caveat that Jim Carrey was talking about, whereby he says, just because you fail to pick your dreams, doesn't mean that you will be successful on your other path. It can also turn sour. And for me, I have decided to look at that and say to myself, well, then, if there is no guarantee, no matter what you pick, then you better just kind of like pick what's best for you and then live the rest to life. Because at the end of the day, we have to realize that there is no book and there is no, well-trodden path, and there is no sort of like, there is no sure bet. There is no guarantee of success of anything at all. And if you reframe failure as a learning opportunity, it's pretty much the best thing that you can do to cope with life. Because if you continue to look at everything, and this is now what I'm learning to do, as a binary situation whereby you've either won everything or lost everything, then that's not really that's not a fulfilling way to look at life. But the other way that I'm looking at it, the other thing that I'm learning, is to think not necessarily in terms of this harsh paths that you have to stick to, but more of like same way water will adapt to whatever environment it is in and whatever shape that you put it in. And it's a very easy and malleable way to kind of like go through life. So there is no piece of advice that is absolute. There is no path that guarantees success. There is no mechanism or anything that you'll conjure up that will kind of like be the magic pill and unlock all life's opportunities. We're pretty much just kind of like making it up as we go along. And the beauty of it that I'm understanding now is the ability to just be present and sort of enjoy it irrespective of the outcomes. So by focusing mainly just on your inputs and what I said, what you can control, and sort of like not placing so much emphasis on outcomes because you have no control over them, then you will have a better way of enjoying life and not necessarily just going through the motion. You'll actually have memories and you will be present. You will actually enjoy even the little things. So this notion that, sacrifice everything and, you'll be happy when you're 40 years old, when you have all the money and all of that. I looked at that and I was like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense because now you'll have 40 years that you'll never get back. But instead, if you look at every day as, just this, it's just a day and there's nothing else that you can do about it, just be present and enjoy it. I think that's a much better life philosophy. And yeah, that's what I was thinking about.